Going old school today, little Q&A. Today's question is handwritten, nice touch, and it comes to us from Scott, and he says, "Hey Ted, love the videos. I have got a question. I feel really stuck as a photographer, like I don't feel like I'm going anywhere." Oh, you're not alone. I've tried Instagram, even went back to Flickr, and I just can't seem to gain any ground. Yeah, there's a lot of people who want to do the same thing. I don't think I'm a bad photographer. I do work for myself, and that's okay, but what I really want to do is get my stuff out there, and it's frustrating when I can't seem to get any traction. Is it possible to have success in photography today, and how do I even go about that? Thank you, Scott. So Scott, there are essentially three things that I want to say about this because yes, I do think it is possible to be successful as a photographer today. The definition of what success is as a photographer has changed a lot though over the last 10 years and the previous 20 and the previous 30. In fact, the rate of change is moving faster than it's ever been, and the traditional concepts of what success is as a photographer are changing all the time too. Having said that though, one thing that I think would greatly help, because I don't see it in your note, is I think it's really important to define what it is that you want to do with photography, and you need to stick with that plan. Then having said that, once you've decided what it is you want to do, I think it's really important to leave yourself open to other possibilities that come down the road, because sometimes the finish line is not exactly where you thought it was. And I'm not saying take every opportunity and be scatterbrained about it, but just be open to other things as well, because I think that's important. But you need to define at least what it is that you want to do, because that's the starting point you're going to need for anything. The second thing I would say about this, and I'm sure we're going to get comments on this, but you have to be careful with this whole phrase, "I do work for myself." I understand where people are coming from when they say that, and I think it is important. You need to make yourself happy with the work that you're producing if you expect anybody else to buy into it. But what I hear is I also hear people using that as an excuse. And so maybe something didn't get the traction they wanted it to on Instagram, or somebody made a comment about something, "Well, I only do work for myself." It's like the excuse to get out of it. Be careful with that phrase, and think of it like this. I have used this metaphor for social media before, and I think it applies here as well. But imagine going to a cocktail party where you don't know anyone, and the goal of why you've gone to this cocktail party is you want to make some connections, make some friends, do some networking, that kind of thing. And if you do one of two things, you go sit in the corner and drink for yourself, then that's going to be a complete failure, and you're going to go home miserable. The other thing that would be a huge mistake is to go around and just start flaunting yourself and talking about yourself all the time, because people don't want to do that. They want to have a conversation, and I don't think it's much different in the world of photography. I think you have to have something that people can feel a part of. I think you have to have something to say that is interesting to hear. Those are little things. It's like the life cocktail party here, but it's in the photography world, and I think your work has to do that. So for instance, you mentioned Instagram, and I don't know how serious you got about Instagram, if it was a couple images in a couple weeks and then you gave up, but what I see a lot of people doing is they want their work to speak for itself, so they don't like to use hashtags. They don't like to use words. They don't like to describe. They don't like to label anything. And you can't possibly expect people to connect just on the power of the image alone. I guess you can. It's just a lot harder. And even in the subject of your images, are you just posting random things, or are you posting things people could relate to? Are you telling a process of what it is that you're going through? These are all kind of things we refer to as narrative, and they tell a story. And that's where you're going to find success of people who are interested in seeing more of your work. You have to be able to communicate that to them, and that's really important. I'm going to give you a really interesting example. A couple weeks ago, I put up a video. It's an interview that I did with my friend Brett Culp. Brett is really interesting, and he got a film that he produced on Netflix, and that's the title of the video, is How to Get Your Film on Netflix. I was really interested in Brett when I first met him because I do the artist series, and that's something I feel I struggle with. And how do I get that onto a platform like Netflix? And I wanted to know the answer. And his answer actually surprised me, and it's in that video. He hands you the keys. Basically, he did a documentary project, and documentary projects are hard. They're hard to get people to get interested in. They always sound interesting, but actually devoting a couple hours to watching it are two different things. He did a video about the power of people have when they're kids, and the fact that kids will do these gregarious, very generous things that adults sometimes won't. It's a really sweet movie, and it's interesting because when they finished the film, they decided to do this thing with a screening. I'm going to link up to it. Go listen to it from him. Essentially, to cut to the chase, the long and short of it is that they involved theaters that would show it as long as they would donate their proceeds to charity, and it went like wildfire. It kind of went viral. They had hundreds of movie theaters. They were able to take something to Netflix at that point that was more than just some guy's documentary. There was a movement around it, that people were involved. I think that's the same thing that we have to do with our work. We have to find ways to have a community around it and get people involved. That's going to be the key to success. Go watch the video. Nobody else did, but I think it's really important. important. And the third part of this equation, and I know this is going to seem like the most obvious, and there are tons of people online, people like Gary Vaynerchuk, that will hammer this down your throat a lot, but it is so true. In the end, you have to do the work. Let me talk about what doing the work means. There is an author, Stephen Pressfield, and he has a book called The War of Art that I read years and years ago. I was fascinated with it because it deals with doing creative work. And Pressfield is an author, he writes, and for him, he has a very kind of utilitarian blue-collar approach to it. In other words, for creative work, a lot of people see creativity as this thing that, a light's going to shine during your sleeping and something's going to be bestowed on your mind. And creativity really doesn't work like that. Creativity is kind of like, I've said this many times, it's like going to the gym. If you haven't been in a while, you're not going to be able to run as far, you're not going to be able to swim as fast, you're not going to be able to lift as much weight, so on and so forth, because you're not doing it. And I think creativity is the same thing. There is a myth, and I firmly believe this, that only certain people are creative. I don't buy into that at all. I think everyone has the capacity to be creative in whatever it is they do. No matter if you think they're left-brained or right-brained, they can be creative to a degree. But if you're not doing it, it's very hard to get into that groove. So you need to do the work. You've got to show up every day and you've got to do it. And if you see yourself as wanting to be big on Instagram, I think you can still do it. It's very competitive, but you've got to understand Instagram. You've got to be obsessive about it. You have to show up. You have to post. You have to put tags in there. You have to play the game. You've got to understand that people are only a very limited attention span when they're scrolling through a feed of images, and you've got to start doing things that catch people's attention. I don't necessarily think this means you'll see a lot of people that just duplicate the same kinds of photos, and that certainly is a recipe to getting some ground, but I don't think it really has a long-term resonance with it, because what you're essentially doing is copying and just going with the flow, and you need to break out of that if you want long-term success. But what I'm saying is there are ways to do it. You really have to dedicate yourself and go all in. I make videos online. It wasn't always easy. I've done this for almost 10 years now. In fact, next month, October 8th, will be the date in 2008 when I uploaded my first video, and it wasn't to YouTube. Actually, it was on iTunes only for a while, and then later on, YouTube kind of became a thing. Early days of YouTube were like bootleg TV shows with really bad quality and a 10-minute upload limit, so I really wasn't interested in that, so I held off. But when I mentioned earlier about keeping your options open, that became an avenue later that did pretty well for me, and now we have Facebook and Instagram introducing video too. I don't think they've matured yet, but it'll be interesting to see where they go. I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to end it here, but those are the three keys that I think are going to go into contributing to your success as a photographer. You've got to be passionate about it because it takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of quiet work sometimes. It's like there were days where I remember posting images or videos and no one cared. Nobody looked at it. That's fine. I didn't give up. I kept at it. I kept the fight. I kept going, and that's the most important thing. If you can do that, you will succeed, but you're going to have to put some energy into it. There are days where you're not going to feel like it, but all those things. I hope I've answered your question. If you guys have any comments, I would love to open this up for discussion as well, so feel free to leave them below. The whole theme here of how difficult it is to succeed in photography today. Let me know what you guys think. I will see you in the next video. Until then, later.